Welcome, everyone, to Couch Potato Diary. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for hanging out today as we get ready for the start of the baseball season. Another day dedicated a lot to previewing what's going to be coming from MLB here in 2026. As always, you probably saw it if you're watching off the top, but we'll play it again. We're presented by Sea of Dead. Head over to seaofdead403.ca and grab all that great Calgary swag. So like I said, we have a lot coming up in terms of the baseball previews. Today, we are going to be looking at, this is the final one because the season starts. We're going to be getting into the Blue Jays preview because their season starts on Friday. But this one, we're going to do the over-unders for every team in MLB and just a bit of an analysis as we go along, and then some playoff picks and everything like that. So that is what's on the docket. As always, follow me on social media. I'm at Primetime Klein everywhere that there is social media. If you are listening, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a review. All that stuff really does help. And if you're watching this on YouTube, again, hit subscribe and hit the like button and let me know your thoughts on the show in the comment section down below. So let's get right into it. The baseball season is here, and all the optimism of spring quickly makes way to a lot of pressure. And for three coaches in Major League Baseball, that also means that the nice comfy chair they were sitting on out in Arizona or in Florida for spring training now becomes pretty hot. Here are three coaches who I think are on the hot seat entering the 2026 MLB season. Whose job's on the line going into this season? I got three coaches who feel like they are coaching for, or managers, I guess, who feel like they are managing for their jobs in the 2026 season. At number 3, Rob Thompson for the Philadelphia Phillies. It is an aging group. It is a desperate fan base that has had a very good run, but is trying to get over that last hump. It's a much more competitive National League East this season, I think, with Atlanta being healthier and the Mets spending the way they are. There's a lot of pressure on Thompson to try to get this thing over the finish line. So I think that seat that he's sitting on is real hot right now. Up next is Carlos Mendoza. When your owner has rules named after him to try to limit spending, there's pressure on you to win. And then when they go out and spend a ton of money for what could be a one-year contract on Bo Bichette and make the move for Luis Robert and make all of these different acquisitions, Peralta as well, there's an expectation that you're going to do well. And so with that, I think there's a ton of pressure on Mendoza. You factor in also that they completely collapsed a season ago. I think it's an incredibly hot seat that he is currently sitting on out there in Queens. And we don't have to go far for number 1. I think it's Aaron Boone. There is so much frustration around that Yankee fan base that Boone is even still there. So he needs this to be a very good season out in New York. There is always pressure for them to win a championship. And they got back there a couple of years ago, but then they kind of got dummied by the Blue Jays, and they haven't won since 2009. Those types of numbers, inexcusable for the Pinstripes and for their fans. So I think Aaron Boone certainly sitting on the hot seat for the 2025 season. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Is there anyone I should have added to this list, or am I being too hard on any of these guys? Hit me up in the comments, and we can keep the conversation going there. And hey, while you're there, hit that subscribe button, leave me a like, and let's help grow this channel, shall we? We talk a lot about coaches who are on the hot seat, but what about the players? There are 5 guys who I think there's a lot of pressure on coming into the 2026 season. So let's see which players are on the hot seat going into a new baseball year. So, who is under the most pressure going into 2026? Maybe not the most pressure, because I think that's probably just Aaron Judge and just the entirety of the Yankees. I guess some guys on the Mets too. But these guys who I think whether it is losing their job or losing a spot in baseball or just something, but I think these are 5 guys who are on the hot seat for the 2026 season. Let's begin out in San Francisco. Luis Arraez signs a 1-year, $12 million deal with the Giants, despite being a guy who is perpetually leading the league in batting average and never strikes out. It's a lot of things that teams 15 years ago would be clamoring for, but instead you are seeing being someone who really sells out to just never strike out, and puts the ball in play, even in non-advantageous situations. And there's a reputation building. He's also not the fastest dude, and he's certainly not the best fielder. So there's a lot of pressure on him and a lot of talk around him that he is just kind of doing it for himself and not the most effective guy when you're talking about impacting winning. I think there's a role for him in Major League Baseball, but he needs to prove it this year on a Giants team that does need a little bit of help on the offensive side. This feels like it's insane for a guy who's always hitting 300, but this does kind of feel like the last dance for Luis Arraez if he wants to stay around and play for competitive Major League Baseball teams. At number 4, we're doubling up in this one, but Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos with the Mets. A couple of very interesting young players, but they're both 26 years old now, and they kind of took a bit of a step back last year. And look, again, they're new to Major League Baseball, but there's a lot of optimism and a lot of hope around these guys to step in and be productive. And now you don't really have a whole lot of wiggle room because of how badly last season ended and because of how much this team spent to get into that conversation in 2026. If neither of these guys or either of these guys don't start producing in the way that a lot of people thought they could, then I do wonder if they become the big part of a trade package to try to go out and get another big name into New York. So I think there's a lot of pressure on these guys this season, and maybe it's unfair because if the season goes sideways, it'll probably be because they didn't do enough with the pitching staff or the bullpen. But when you have a lineup that features Lindor, Soto, Bichette, Polanco as well, you're expected to carry your weight a little bit. And these guys are going to be expected to kind of keep that line moving. So I think there's a lot of pressure on them this year. And if it doesn't happen, like I said, I think both guys could be packaged up in a move for another superstar with the Mets. Speaking of trades involving the Mets, Brandon Nimmo up next from the Texas Rangers. He gets dealt by the Mets and then thrown under the bus for some locker room disturbances that were going on last season with New York. And one of the reasons why there was that collapse from a team that a lot of people had pegged as one of the top ones in the National League East. And so this is a big make-right year for him. It's a Ranger squad that has some exciting young players and a superstar in Seager at the top of that lineup. If Nimmo can't get back to bordering on all-star levels, or if there are more issues with him in the clubhouse or anything like that, I don't know how many other teams are going to be taking a chance on this dude. So this feels like a really important reputation season for Brandon Nimmo. Before we get into our top 2, do want to remind you guys that we're trying to grow this thing here with Couch Potato Diary. So hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and let me know in the comments if you agree with any of these ones or if there's someone who I'm missing that could be on the move if this season doesn't necessarily go all that well. Coming in at number 2, it's Trent Grisham with the Yankees. I don't know of many Yankee fans who are super stoked that Grisham accepted that qualifying offer from the Bombers last season. They did still get Cody Bellinger and are running it back, but I do think that if this year gets off to a bit of a shaky start, then Bellinger moves into center, Dominguez is back out and left, that they have some prospects coming in as well, and I think Grisham becomes kind of the odd man out, and because it's the Yankees and there's that bigger spotlight, I wonder how much of a reputation hit that does bring. So it feels, again, a little unfair for a guy who did step up at times a season ago, but does certainly have a ceiling with the Yankees. It does feel a little unfair to say, oh, and by the way, if you don't produce this year, you're gone. But there's a difference between exceeding expectations at $5 million and meeting them at 22. So we'll see what he can do now this season and what happens there. And at number 1, this one feels just bat crap insane, but it's Adley Rutschman from the Baltimore Orioles. We were already getting some rumblings last season and last offseason that the Orioles might be looking to move their once prized catcher and try to get things going, because it hasn't come out of the blocks the way that a lot of people thought it would, and there has been a bit of a fall off. And you can see, you can see where Baltimore's a little bit worried that a top catching prospect who looks good at one point and then maybe falls off a bit with Matt Wieters. Now I think Wieters maybe had a bit of a better career than some people thought, but it certainly wasn't some of the levels that others kind of projected for him when he was a prospect. A ton of pressure again on Baltimore this season, and they got a studded lineup. If they're competitive, Rutschman isn't really getting it done. do you convince another team that, hey, no, it's just the pressure or whatever? Give us your top pitcher. We'll give you Adley Rutschman, and you can build around this guy now. I wonder if that kind of happens. So I think there's some pressure on Rutschman, and if it doesn't happen for him this season, I do wonder if there's a move that's happening because we already got some of those rumors from last year. So those are the 5 players that I think are on the hot seat entering this season. Was I unfair to any of them, and did I miss anybody? Let me know in the comments, and we can keep the conversation going there. Or hit me up on social media. I am at Primetime Klein on Instagram, X, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky. We can have the chat over there if you just want to go direct to the source. The baseball season is here, and so we've done all the previewing. We've broken everything down. It's time to now figure out how each team is going to do. We're going to start in the American League, looking at the over-under predictions for every team in the AL, and we will kick things off in the American League East. So it is always the marquee division in MLB, the American League East, and this year is no exception as you have 4 very good teams residing in this division. So we'll start with the one that isn't, the Tampa Bay Rays. Their total is at 78.5. I just have to go under on this. You look at everything going on in this division with Baltimore getting better, with Boston, I would say getting better. Yankees at least staying steady, but that's with 94 wins from a season ago. And the Blue Jays pitching staff getting better, offense, you can certainly make that debate. But this is a tough spot for Tampa Bay to be in. And the thing that is going to keep their heads above water here is the pitching. They are going to need everyone on that rotation, or everyone in that rotation, to pitch to their baseball reference page, basically, to have a hope. And then they're going to need more than just one breakout from this team offensively. So I don't see them finding a way to be competitive here in the AL East, and that is why I am going under with the 78.5 for the Tampa Bay Rays. The Baltimore Orioles are up next. They are at 85.5, and I'm going a tick under on this one. Again, I think if they played in the Central, they probably win that division by 30 games. If they play in the West, I think it would be pretty competitive as well. But I think when you look at how this division is set up, yes, this might be the best lineup in the division, 1 through 9, but the pitching staff just doesn't match up with Boston, with New York, certainly not with the Toronto Blue Jays. And all of those teams, while they don't have Rutschman, Henderson, Ward, Alonso, we'll see what happens with Holiday and all of those guys. Like, this is a very deep lineup. That they have the best lineup of all of those. But Boston can still slug. The Yankees have to slug to stay competitive. The Blue Jays were a gold standard for offense in 2025. All of those offenses can at least hold their own with Baltimore's, but I don't think the Orioles staff comes close to being able to hold its own with the Red Sox, Yankees, and Blue Jays. So I think the Orioles, a good team, an improved team, they are going to be a problem for teams this year in the East. I just don't think they're going to be able to surpass Boston or New York or Toronto. So I do have them going slightly under at 85.5. In the middle of division, it's the Boston Red Sox. Their total is at 87.5. And again, I am going under on this one. It's the division they're in. They didn't make that big splash that a lot of people were hoping that they would. They did well in the offseason. Like, don't get me wrong. This was an offseason where they did make quite a few additions and just brought in some solid pieces here. Losing Bregman, I think hurts, but I think it's something that they were anticipating. It didn't feel like they were really in the running for him at all. But then they weren't in on Bichette, obviously. That they didn't get Tucker. They didn't make that one big move to really kind of solidify things, but it's still a really solid team. Again, I just don't think they're as good as the Yankees, and I don't think they're as good as the Blue Jays right now. It's the story that, look, I grew up a Blue Jays fan, and you can see, especially this week, with the camera so close and all the lighting, there's some grays in here, all right? So I'm a long-weathered American League East fan. It is kind of the spot that the Blue Jays were in for a long time there, where this was a good team, and good enough to win the Central, certainly, maybe the West as well, but It's just not good enough in this division right now. So Boston, really good ball team. Don't get me wrong, but I do have them going just a touch under at 87.5. The Yankees are up next. Their total came in at 90.5. I do have to go over on this one, and it pains me a touch to say complimentary things about the Yankees. This is still a very good baseball team, right? Like, I know that there's been a lot of dunking on them for running it back and everything there, but you do have to remember that they are running it back from the team that they brought in at the trade deadline. It's not like this was the same group that went 162 with the Yankees a season ago. And that's where I think there should be some optimism here for New York, because defensively it was a punchline for them, and they ran into a team that was almost exactly opposite from them, and it did show a lot of warts that they had. But defensively, this team got better when they brought in McMahon and Caballero and those guys. So defensively, I think they will be improved this season. And I think that, like McMahon and all of those guys, it's a little whatever on the offensive side, but it's an offense that can hit the hell out of a baseball. The big thing for me is how good Bednar looked in the WBC. He's going to be at the back end of that bullpen, really trying to shut things down. They have been, and they've shown that they'll be very aggressive in trying to address that bullpen. I do think there are going to be some issues getting to Bednar in the ninth inning for New York, but I think that him looking as dominant as he did for some stretches there in the WBC, I think that's going to carry over into the season. The big thing for me is this pitching staff, and there's a lot of optimism coming out of New York around this rotation with Garrett Cole coming back from Tommy John, Carlos Rodon. A lot of people really excited about how healthy he is looking. If we talked about him in terms of guys who can decide the season, if Schlittler can take the step forward that you think he probably would, and Fried kind of stays the same, like if everyone, again, pitches to their baseball reference page, this is a dominant rotation in MLB. But Cole's coming back from Tommy John. Rodon is inconsistent and gets banged up. Fried has not been immune to injury issues either. And Schlittler is now had a full season of tape on him also. So how is he going to be able to respond to that? So there's a wide variance, and I think a lot of that comes from the starting rotation, which is why I do have them second right now in MLB, or in the American League East. And number one, obviously there's some homerism here, but I do have the Blue Jays. Gone is Bo Bichette, but this team has added a tremendous amount of starting rotation depth. You look at who the Blue Jays are missing from the rotation on opening day. Francis is going to be gone for the season. Bieber dealing with some arm issues stemming from the postseason. Same thing with Trey Savage, and Jose Barrios felt like he was fine, but apparently has a fracture in his arm. So that is a very solid, that four is better than any four Baltimore is going to put out there this season in terms of starting rotation. And yet the Blue Jays still put out a five-man unit to start that you feel comfortable with. So there are going to be challenges, obviously, but this team is positioned really well to just be able to have, and this sounds silly, but go back and watch any other team. It's not always the case. The Blue Jays are positioned to have major league caliber starting pitching regardless of injury for this upcoming season. That this is at its healthiest, it's one of the best staffs in baseball. And even now when it's not at its healthiest, it's still very, very strong. The lineup, yes, they lose something in Bichette, but I really do think that there's a breakout coming for Addison Barger. We talked about that earlier in the breakdowns. You have Dalton Varsho, who hit 450 this spring, and if he would have stayed healthy, he was hitting at a 45 home run pace last year. He just couldn't stay healthy, but he had a very good postseason. You do have to assume there's some regression coming for Springer, maybe a little bit from Ernie Clement. Again, I don't think he's going to set the record for most hits in the playoffs again, but Okamoto, I'm really excited to see what he can do, and I think there is a leveling up from Barger, a leveling up from Dalton Varsho, and Vlad Guerrero Jr. seems like he has found his ultimate form now from the playoffs and now the WBC. So I still think this lineup is going to be one that is very frustrating to pitch against with the big bat and maybe big bats in the middle. The bullpen's a question, obviously. When you blow a lead in Game 7 of the World Series, I think it's fair to question it. Rogers and Varland as a couple of guys who can just eat up a ton of innings back there and be effective. We'll see what Jimmy Garcia can come back and be. I think that they have something in Fluharty, the lefty out of the pen also. So it's a question mark, absolutely. But when Hoffman is on, he is great. And I think one of the issues he had last season was they had to work him like a dog early in the year. And we saw every win mattered for Toronto. So it worked. But I don't know if he ever found his early season form again, and that they had to really manage him the rest of the way. With Varland, a full season with him now, with Rogers, a full season with him now, you're presuming, and some other guys who got some experience from last season, Fishers, Fluharty's, and the like there. I think that he will be relied on less in every leverage situation for this club this season. So I'm going over 87.5 for the Blue Jays, and I have them winning the American League East. Let's go into the Central Division now. Up first, the Chicago White Sox, under 66.5 wins. I don't see a whole lot happening here. I understand they got Murakami, and that's fantastic for them, but not that Luis Robert was any big shakes or anything like that for this team the last couple of seasons, but there's not a whole lot of talent on this club. And when you're looking at the rest of this division, it's not the strongest, but I still don't see them really making much progress this season. Up next, the Minnesota Twins. I have them under 72.5. I think that this is now a big transition year for them. They were borderline sellers at the deadline. This team did not get better in the offseason, and now I think this will be the time Ryan gets moved out. I think Buxton probably gets moved, and I think it's the start of a full-blown teardown rebuild, whatever you want to call it, out in Minnesota, and with that, a lot of losses coming, so I have them under 72.5. This one, up next, pretty predictable if you've been watching the rest of the previews. I have Cleveland going under 78.5. The pitching staff is great, and they have been able to mix and match all along. But now with the Stephen Kwan contract situation and him not having an extension and that being a little tenuous, not that he's going to just tank it or anything like that, but I do wonder if he gets moved at some point, and the offense that has just been able to squeak by with Kwan and Ramirez and then a Hope, it's asking a lot of Jose Ramirez. So yes, I have been wrong in predicting the downfall of the Guardians before, but I think this is the time where it actually happens. So I have them under 78.5. Up next, second in the division, I have the Tigers under 85.5. And I said this before, I think a little bit of it might just be a little karmic from the weird situation with Tarek Skubal and how that all went down in arbitration. I think they got best case scenario out of a lot of dudes in that lineup a season ago, and now banking on Valdez just fitting in fine, Flaherty being very effective, and you'll see what you get out of Verlander. I just think it's too many if for this team. So I have them going under at 85.5, and I wonder. I think it's going to get to a point where there's real conversations about what they do with Tarek Skubal around the trade deadline. And so winning the division this year, I have the Kansas City Royals. They were able to pull it off a couple of seasons ago. Bobby Witt Jr. showed at the WBC that he is an absolute superstar. I think they have enough hitting, and I think the pitching can take a step forward after a bit of a rough one a season ago. So I like what Kansas City is building out there right now around Bobby Witt Jr. I think he is enough to get that team over and across the finish line as your Central Division champions, which leaves now the American League West. But before we get to that, again, want to remind you guys, if you could hit that subscribe button, it really does help grow this channel. Hit the like as well, and let me know. I can't imagine I'm going to go just straight 15 for 15 in the division with all of you agreeing with me. So let me know what you guys are thinking as we go through the American League, and we can keep the conversation going down in the comments. Up next, the AL West, it is the LA Angels at 70.5 wins. The perpetually disappointing LA Angels will once again be disappointing. Trading away Taylor Ward, bringing in a little bit of pitching help, I think is certainly needed. And like Trout was actually healthy last season and didn't really do a whole lot. Neto is a fun player. Soler, we know what he is at this point. I just don't think there's enough there, pitching wise or hitting wise, for this team to be overly competitive in a division that does feel like it's getting better. Up next, second last in the division. I have the Houston Astros. I think this is going to be a fall-off season for them. They have been able to somehow keep their heads above water with loss after loss after loss. They bring in Amai, who a lot of people are excited about out of Japan, but asking him to fill in for Framber Valdez, who vibes were bad, and I just criticized Detroit for signing him and said he could be a down for them. So now it's weird to also be criticizing Houston for not having him, but they just, I think, have taken too many hits throughout the seasons to be able to keep up at the pace that they have. And I do wonder if they get to a point where they kind of recognize that as the season goes on and make a couple of build up for next year sort of moves out there. So I'm going under with them at 85.5, which means the team without a hometown is third in the AL West. It is the Athletics. Severino was great in the WBC. That part of their game is starting to come along, but you look at some of the exciting players they have offensively. Kurtz is already in the discussion as the top first baseman in the American League or in all of baseball. Langoliers had a big bounce back season for them a year ago. So this is a team that's going to keep that progression going and be hovering right around 500, I think, this season. The Texas Rangers, I have them over 83.5 wins. Sorry. I think I've said points a few times in this too. Apologies for that. But I have them over 83.5 wins this season. I think the offense is going to be fine. I think people are really sleeping on this pitching staff. With DeGrom being relatively healthy-ish a season ago, Mackenzie Gore coming in, I think really solidifies what they are doing in that pitching rotation out in Texas, and I think that's going to be enough in this division to kind of carry them forward. I actually don't want to give too much away, but I have them making the playoffs right now. I just think they're going to be that good this year. I think the offense, like no Simeon, bringing in Nimmo, I feel like Nimmo getting away from everything in New York, I think there's going to be a little bit of motivation because he's been thrown under the bus a lot for reasons why things didn't go well with the Mets. So I think there's going to be a little bit of motivation from him, and I think there's going to be some progress from some of those exciting young hitters that have been coming up the last couple of seasons. So I think the Rangers get the job done and get over 83.5, and that leaves the Seattle Mariners. I have them over 89.5. I love this lineup. The addition of Donovan is a really, really smart move from them. It's still a little top heavy, but that top goes like 6 deep with this team. Losing Polanco was a bit of a surprise, but I think pivoting with Donovan is great. Raleigh, you can probably take under 62 home runs for the season, but he is still going to be a real factor. Julio Rodriguez, it feels like there's still another level that he could get to, and a full season of Naylor helping out as well. I like this group a lot offensively. And then the pitching staff is, again, one of the best in baseball. They do, I think, still need to add a little bit more depth in the bullpen. We saw that in the American League Championship Series where they basically fell one relief pitcher short against Toronto, but that's in Game 7 of the ALCS. So just a little bit extra help there, I think is going to go a long way for this team. But there's a reason why most power rankings have them as at least the highest ranked team in the American League, and I certainly have them winning the American League West. So those are the over-under predictions for every team in the American League. Like I said, I can't imagine we agree on every single one of them. So let me know in the comments what you are thinking about this, how you think I did, and where you disagree. Let me know. And just hit the like button. You've been here the whole time. If you're hate watching at this point, I think you just give me a thumbs up just for the effort. But also hit that subscribe button. It would really, really go a long way in helping move this channel along. We continue our MLB preview now, looking at the National League. Let's go team by team, breaking down how I think each team is going to do in the 2026 season, starting with what should be a really competitive National League East. So, the National League has been reigned over by the Dodgers for the last few seasons, but I think some very worthy adversaries are going to come out of this for the upcoming season, and I think some of that could come from the National League East. So let's break it down. Where it won't be coming from is the Washington Nationals, as they are now in Rebuild 2.0 following the trade of Mackenzie Gore. They did really well in the Juan Soto trade, and then got nothing else aside from that. They haven't really hit on a whole lot, and now moving the big part of that Soto trade out is a real blow for this team. I don't see much reason for optimism for the Nationals in 2026. Up next, the Miami Marlins, kind of ditto. At 72.5, I have them going under. And just one thing, with the whole National League, I have more overs here than I would like, and I'm sure that the numbers don't all add up. But I think the bad is going to be really bad in the NL this season. And I think the Marlins making the move, sending Cabrera off to the Cubs, I think this is now finally the year that Sandy Alcantara gets moved from Miami, and I just don't like what's coming up behind all of those guys. So I think they've waited too long to sell on what was a good pitching staff. And if you're going to wait on that, that's fine. But they didn't add nearly enough around them to make this team competitive. So it's a tough spot for the Marlins, I feel, for Miami fans. But it's going to be under at 72.5, and I think it's going to be a long year out in Miami. Up next, the New York Mets. If you've been watching the previews at all, you will know that I am under on this one at 90.5. Now, I also said this is one of the most talented teams in baseball. I think that this is still going to be a playoff team, or at least one that's going to be competing for a playoff spot, but I just think that the growing pains with Bichette at third base, with the rotation over at first, with some of the young kids working their way in, I just think it's going to be a bit of a slower start this season. Basically the opposite of what happened in Queens last year, where it's going to be a not bad, but a slower start to the season, and then they get stronger and better as the year goes on. This lineup is going to be dangerous, and they're going to slug their way to a number of victories this year. Peralta at the top of this rotation, and that's an ace. That's a big one. There are some pretty big question marks behind it, though, with some of the young players that came in and pitched well a season ago, but can you rely on that now for this season? It's too inconsistent, but now it's an ace and then inconsistent. And I don't love the moves they made with the bullpen. I didn't look at the Yankees last year and think, oh, we need to replicate that bullpen. But maybe getting out of the Bronx will help Williams kind of reach that level that he had with the Milwaukee Brewers. But I think that's a bit of a downgrade there as well. So they made a lot of moves, and it's exciting for the Mets, but 90 wins, I don't see it. The Philadelphia Phillies, their total was at 89.5. I'm going over on the Phillies. I still think, I get disappointing into last season. You have your GM coming out and saying that your star player isn't a star player anymore, and then he looks like a star player in the WBC. This is still a team that is very, very good, and a lineup that is feared and dangerous, and a starting staff that, not the deepest anymore, but pretty strong. Bullpen is solid as well. I feel like it's not as flashy, and they were maybe hoping for a big move. They were in a lot on Bo Bichette before he ends up going to the Mets. This is still a solid lineup and a solid baseball team, and I think people are kind of sleeping on them a little bit because it's just they've run into a bit of a wall in the postseason, and that wall, of course, wearing Dodger blue. But at the top of the division this year, I'm going all in on the Atlanta Braves. I think last year was a season from hell. They had just injury issues all over the place. You look at this lineup 1 through 9, it is an incredibly talented ball club. And then with the additions they made in the starting rotation, with the additions they made out in the bullpen as well, I think you have to be really confident in what this team is. Obviously, there are going to be some injury issues again, but I don't think it's going to be to every star player this team has. So I think they're going to be taking a huge step forward just because everyone's there, and then you give one of the more aggressive GMs in the league an opportunity to get better and make his team a contender at the deadline. And we know Anthopoulos is going to jump on that 1,000 times out of 10. So I like the Braves a lot this season. I'm going over 87.5. Let's now go to the National League Central. And when I said the bad teams are going to be really bad, I had the St. Louis Cardinals in mind. And that's not something we have said about the Cardinals for a lot of my lifetime. But it's just kind of chipped away at it. And I think they understand now where they are, and more specifically, probably where they aren't. It is a transition time out in St. Louis. It's a pretty solid division otherwise, and I think they're going to have some real troubles this year. And anything that's good on this team, I think it's sold off before we get to August. So a long year out in St. Louis. Up next, the Milwaukee Brewers. I have them going under at 84.5. I think Sending Peralta out the door. Yes, Mizorowski is exciting, but this lineup just does not have enough, in my opinion. And they've been able to develop pitching really, really effectively there. But it is frustrating that you have a team that is constantly competing for division titles and constantly in the playoff picture and then constantly selling pieces off. And I think those are the teams that get me more frustrated than the Dodgers spending $300 million or anything like that. So I think because the rest of the division is kind of pushing forward a little bit, I think the Milwaukee Brewers do take a touch of a step back here this season at under 84.5. Next, I have the Cincinnati Reds. I have them going over 80.5. The Hunter Green injury sucks, but I said before, I think Ellie De La Cruz has the big breakout season we've all been waiting for from him. And they have shown, at least headlines wise, in the offseason, they were trying to be competitive and trying to make a difference. And I think this team, still with a good pitching rotation, still with a solid lineup, I think they're going to be able to do enough to stay competitive and stay close enough that they're going to make some moves adding at the deadline and try to get them over the finish line. And so I think with all of that, I think this is at least a 500 ball club. So I think Cincinnati goes over 80.5. Next up is the Pittsburgh Pirates, second in the Central. I have them over, obviously, 78.5. You have the best pitcher in baseball in Paul Skeens. They made a really smart move with Brandon Lau, bringing him in to play second base. So this lineup, I think, can actually be a little bit threatening. And not like Baltimore Orioles, Bronx Bombers, anything like that, but it's just a solid lineup, especially at the top of it. I think you have a solid, again, pitching staff. It's time for this team to take a step forward, and I think this year they take at least a baby step toward being competitive for the postseason. But atop the division, I have the Chicago Cubs. We talked about them in underrated teams earlier this week. Bringing in Bregman, I think, just kind of rounds out that clubhouse really effectively. It's going to be still a strong team in terms of the batting order and the pitching rotation. Adding Cabrera to what was already a good staff makes this a very dangerous ball club. So I like the Cubs a lot. I think people are kind of sleeping on them a little bit. Losing Tucker, yes, headlines wise, not great, but I think Bregman can get this team back to, he can at least replace that production anyway, and make this maybe even a better lineup than what we saw from them last season. And we know that they're going to be aggressive at the trade deadline if things are going their way. So I like the Cubs to win this division. Let's go to the NL West. But before we do that, if you're enjoying this from Couch Potato Diary and you're watching on YouTube, check out the podcast. Just search Couch Potato Diary on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods. Let's go now to the National League West. And at the bottom, of course, the Colorado Rockies. It's not a good baseball team. They have some young kids coming up. That's neat. They're bad and are going to go under 55.5. And that's a low total, but I still think it's going to go under there this season. Arizona Diamondbacks at 79.5. I love the addition of Nolan Arenado. I think this is just a solid team. I know I talked about Perdomo as an overrated player in MLB, but he's still solid. Marte was on the trading block for a while, but they didn't. And so he is a really good player. Corbin Carroll obviously can be one of the better players in baseball when he's rolling. You add Arenado to that. I still think this pitching staff, I'm holding on to a little bit of what this staff was a couple of seasons ago when they made that run to the World Series. I don't think they're that good, but I don't think they're as bad as we've seen the last couple of seasons. So I think the Diamondbacks, a slight over, but that's just because they get to play Colorado a whole lot this season. San Francisco, I have them over 80.5. We talked about them as an underrated ball club. No, they did not get the big splash that everyone wanted them to get always. Another offseason where that didn't happen, but they made their big splash last year. You get Devers in there. It's a full season with him. It's a full spring training of him playing first base and him being comfortable in the Giants organization. Adding Arraez, I know that he's a very polarizing player, but some good contact to that team. Bader is and at least an improvement over some things in the outfield. The starting staff is just solid. Like, it's a solid team. It's a team that's above 500, I think. So I'm going Giants over 80.5. San Diego Padres, their total's at 83.5. I am also going over on that. Again, like, Tatis had a great WBC. So did Manny Machado. This is a team that is always aggressive when it comes to the trade deadline. And having Mason Miller at the back part of that bullpen for the entirety of the season, I think really does help them out as well. And you know, if they're even close to a playoff spot, that they're going to be aggressive in making those moves. So I said it when we talked about over or underrated teams in MLB this season, this one's not going to miss by a little. The Padres are either going to be flirting with 100 wins or with 60. Because if it goes bad, I think there could be a major teardown out in San Diego. I don't see that part happening, obviously. But there was a touch of Tatis trade speculation in the offseason. I wonder if that gets a little bit louder if things go bad and they try to recoup some things from Miller with him and a few other moves that they could make. I don't see that happening, but I think either way, this team is going to aggressively not be an 83.5 win team, and it's just a matter of which side is it on. But then, of course, the toast of the town, the Los Angeles Dodgers, over 102.5 wins. I can say all I want about Kyle Tucker and his nature and everything like that. It's still an upgrade to this team, and I think Yamamoto takes another step forward. You have Shohei, who's going to be pitching all season long. They have incredible major league depth in the starting rotation, and their one weakness from last season was the bullpen, and they went out and got one of the best closers in baseball in Edwin Diaz. So, there is obviously a path where this goes poorly, right? Where Betts, Freeman finally play to their age and maybe fall off a little bit. Kyle Tucker isn't the guy that everyone thought he would be, and all the injuries that have befelled this pitching staff continue to happen, and Diaz falls off a cliff. That's a lot of ifs that could happen there. I think they're pretty insulated from all of them, and they're the Dodgers, so if any of that happens, they'll just go trade for Fernando Tatis or something like that, and just be fine again. So it's over. 102.5. They're the best team in baseball, without a doubt. So that's how I think it all shakes down in the National League. What do you guys think? Like I said in the American League one, I can't imagine that I just nailed this from the tippy top of the NL East all the way to the bottom of the NL West. So let me know in the comments where you disagree and who you guys have going to the World Series out of the National League. And as always, you can follow me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein on Instagram, X, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky. If you have any issues with anything we talked about here and you're listening in podcast form, or you just want to go direct to the source from watching on YouTube here, hit me up on social media and we can talk about everything there. Time now for the predictions for how the playoffs are going to go in Major League Baseball. I've broken down every team in every division. Now let's see where they slot in the postseason. Let's break it all down. All right, here is how I think the playoffs will go in the 2026 Major League Baseball season. We've been doing previews all week. You'd think I'd have that by now. In the American League, I have the division winners being the Toronto Blue Jays, the Seattle Mariners, and the Kansas City Royals. I think the Mariners finish as the 1 seed with Toronto as the 2, which means Kansas City goes into the wild card bracket. They would take on the 3rd wild card team in the American League, the Boston Red Sox, in the first round of the postseason, while I would have the Yankees and the Rangers facing each other in the wild card round. Coming out of that, I do have Boston beating Kansas City in the wild card. Great showing, Kansas City, but this is the lot in life for the Central Division, losing there. Although I guess they did make the DS last season before the Tigers lost to the Mariners. Anyway, coming out of the Yankee-Texas one, I do have the Yankees winning that again, beating the Rangers. So the playoff for the American League Division Series would be the Mariners taking on the Boston Red Sox, and I have the Blue Jays facing the Yankees. Again, home field advantage helps out both of those teams. Mariners advance. That one I gave quite a bit of thought to, but I do think Mariners advance, and I have the Blue Jays again beating the New York Yankees in the American League Division Series, setting up a rematch for the ALCS, and it would be Seattle taking on Toronto. This time the Mariners have home field advantage, but there's a bias here. So I do have the Blue Jays winning and going to back-to-back World Series. Who will they be facing? Let's look at the National League. Division winners, I have the Dodgers, the Braves, and the Cubs. I think the Dodgers and Atlanta finish 1-2, so they get the bye into the NLDS. In the wildcard round, it will be the Cubs and the Padres, and the Phillies taking on the Mets. I wanted to put the Pirates in there. I just couldn't put them ahead of San Diego. So coming out of that, I do have the Phillies beating the Mets in the wildcard round, which would send New York into just a spiral, I think. And then I do have the Cubs beating the Padres in in the wild card round. So we go to the NLDS, and again, we're going chalk. Both division winners, I think, advancing. I have the Dodgers once again beating the Philadelphia Phillies, and I have the Braves getting past the Chicago Cubs, which sets up the National League Championship Series. Atlanta taking on the LA Dodgers, and I said it before, I'm all in on this Atlanta team and them being able to stay healthy, all the talent they have. So I have the Braves advancing to the World Series, where they will, much like in 1992, fall to the Toronto Blue Jays. So yes, wild homer pick here. I'm not pretending that I'm not. But I do think that the Blue Jays, again, with that lineup just being solid 1 through 9, with them having the capabilities anyway of having one of the best rotations in baseball, and a bullpen that I do think is improved and a little bit more reliable, plus an ownership group that is absolutely willing to spend a ton of money on this ball club to get another $100 million run through the playoffs again, considering that they also own the television rights for the playoffs here in Canada, helps a little bit. So I think this team will be aggressive around the trade deadline and try to make those moves to solidify things. But I think even as it all sits right now, these two teams could face off in the World Series, and I think it would be the Blue Jays getting the job done. So I'm going to assume, again, not everyone watching this video is like, yep, Blue Jays, lock it in, 100%. Let me know where you guys are thinking I went wrong here in the comments, and we can have that discussion down there. And while you're there, hit that share button, whether you want to brag because you're a Jays fan. It's like, see, this guy wearing a Blue Jays hat and an Okotoks, Alberta hoodie that you can't really see. This guy knows his ball, so let's... Nah. Or if you just want to rage bait a Dodgers fan, hit that share button, and we can keep the conversation going with all of them.